All right, we want to switch gears from that and talk about a big conversation that's happening all around the area. The Washington Commanders preparing to move back to Washington, D.C., back to their old stomping grounds, the glory days here at RFK Stadium. Reaction is pouring in this morning to that multi-billion-dollar deal that D.C. is working on to bring the Commanders back here to RFK Stadium. It's a plan that's been 30 years in the making, ever since the team moved to Maryland in 1997. Commanders owner Josh Harris and D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser joined by NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell to announce a nearly $4 billion deal to bring the Commanders home to D.C. It marks the largest private investment in the district ever. That money will go not just towards the stadium, but towards road work, parking garages, and a youth sports complex. The area around the new stadium will have up to 6,000 new homes, shops, restaurants, and bars, and 54 acres of green space. It comes at a time when the district is being asked to limit spending by the federal government. But Mayor Bowser says the city needs this investment now more than ever.
If you need to add revenue, as we do, you can't leave 180 acres vacant. If you need to add jobs, as we do, you cannot wait for an anchor to show up to start developing there. When you need to attract business, you have to be about business.
And the NFL seems to agree.
I think the commitment by Josh and the city to bring the team back into D.C. is a really important one. I think emotionally, but also I think it signifies that they care about this community, they care deeply about it, and they're going to do the right things to make this franchise successful.
In terms of what the new stadium itself will look like, we know it will be a dome stadium, so fans will be inside with 65,000 seats. That's enough to host a Super Bowl. We also are looking at about 8,300 parking spots. The new stadium could open in the fall of 2030. All right, Commanders owner Josh Harris, he's excited about this as well. Chick Hernandez had a chance to talk to him about this plan, and here's what he had to say and talk about how important this is for the team.
9-year-old Josh Harris going to a game, and now here you are bringing what amounts to this team back to that RFK site. On the personal side for you, when this all started to come to fruition, how did it hit you?
It hits you in such an amazing way. You feel part of something that is truly special, that's truly going to make a difference in the city. I mean, I remember on Sundays, everything shutting down. I remember riding my bike to Chevy Chase Circle, and no one's out. There are no cars, and everyone's in watching football. But as a 9-year-old, I remember walking in and hearing the crowd and just being blown away and watching, at that point, probably Sonny Jurgensen or Billy Kilmer, literally.
Sure.
So look, you know, having gone through all those memories, it really matters to me and my family to be able to do this for the city.
Listen, you're a businessman, right? I checked. I Googled you.
It's true, it's true.
It's true. It's all true.
Quietly acknowledged.
When you took over the ownership of this team, was this always the plan? Like when you decided that first thought of, you know what, I want to get this team. Was always the plan to make sure you get this team, build a winner, and move to D.C.?
This was always our first choice to do that. So it was always the plan to reconnect with the city, change the fan experience, and then obviously build a winning team. Mm-hmm. Our first choice was always RFK because we really felt that being the center of DMV, being in D.C., being in the spiritual home, where the team had won so many Super Bowls, being a part of the D.C. community and allowing, you know, for being in the location which made it the easiest for all of our fans, not just our fans in one jurisdiction or another. We always thought that was the right answer.
All right, so you heard Harris there talking about when he was growing up here, the glory days, the 80s and the 90s when Joe Gibbs and that Washington dynasty was built. We're talking about Joe Theismann, won a Super Bowl with him. Doug Williams won a Super Bowl with him. Mark Rippon won a Super Bowl with him. So there's Darrell Green. I mean, you could go on and on the list of great players that have played at this stadium. Yeah, the glory days. So there's a lot of excitement about this conversation about the Commanders coming back to Washington, D.C.? I know you two have fond memories of what went on here as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that when we talk about RFK, the site, we got to talk about the culture. You know, yesterday an amazing video dropped with Joe Theismann voicing it and talking about his experiences firsthand.
Right.
Well, we were all along for that ride. You know, 3 Super Bowls and 5 times going to the big dance. So we're excited, but we know there are a lot of steps to get to before we get there. But what a legacy for Josh Harris, Wisdom.
And Wisdom yesterday,
Yes,
I can't
absolutely.
help.
Yeah.
I was just going to say yesterday during the press conference, I can't help but think back to the question: does this stadium, the new RFK Stadium, potentially raise the chances of us going to the Super Bowl? And Roger Goodell said, "I wasn't prepared to answer that or make that announcement, but dramatically it does." So
Jaden Daniels was at home saying,
Right.
"Yes, it does."
Pressure's on.
All right, Wisdom, thank you.
Yeah. And here's the thing about that with the Annie, you mentioned the Super Bowl. If they put a dome on this, more than likely that will happen, because when most teams that are building these new stadiums now, if they have interest in having the Super Bowl, one of the things they want to do is put that dome on top of it to say weather is not a factor. Come here, you should come here and do the Super Bowl. So let's talk about this, because there are people that are applauding this plan, but it's not yet a done deal. At this moment, there are some concerns about the money, and the D.C. Council still needs to approve it. This is a $3.8 billion plan that's been laid out here. The Commanders are supposed to cover $2.7 billion of it, and the district has committed to covering the rest, which is a little more than $1.1 billion. And some say they're confused about why the city would talk about investing that much taxpayer money, that many dollars, when the city is facing a budget crisis. Jess Arnold is here now with more about these concerns. I mean, these are legitimate concerns, especially when you're talking about, anytime you're talking about money and sports. And
gets people fired up.
It gets people fired up. Yeah, it gets people fired up, Jess.
Yeah, and so the council would have to be on board with this, right? I mean, that's a whole crux of all of this. And some of them have signaled support, right? Being at the mayor's announcement yesterday, 4 council members to name. Council members Pinto, we have McDuffie, we have Bonds, and we have Felder, who all are saying that they are signaling their support for this. 7 out of 12 of these council members would have to be on board. So first, let's start there. Let's hear from the council members that would support this, including the one who is in charge, of course, of this area, Ward 7 council member Wendell Felder. We're going to hear from him, as well as council member McDuffie.
As a council member, I do plan to conduct a robust community engagement plan to go directly to neighbors, especially around the surrounding communities, and figure out what we can do to ensure that their quality of life is not disrupted.
We want to make sure that we're working together as a council, working with the executive to do what's in the best interest of District of Columbia residents and taxpayers and families, and that's our priority. This deal is going to fit within those priorities.
Other council members are flagging major concerns, though, like Council Chair Phil Mendelson, as well as Council Member Charles Allen. Charles Allen has said this is a bad deal for D.C., saying in part in a statement, when the district is facing a recession and tens of thousands of workers are losing their jobs, this proposal is asking D.C. residents to pay more than $4 million for each and every home game for the next 30 years. A proposal that doesn't even include funding for a sorely needed metro station expansion to give people alternatives to driving. He added that unlike Nats Park and Capital One Arena that hosts events year-round, it will not be as active most of the year, and so to them it can't become an economic engine. Now, some D.C. neighbors have been asking, how can we be talking about paying $1 billion for a stadium when the city is facing major budget cuts? We talked about money at the top of this. The money is actually coming from different pots, so that's important to remember. We have the operating and the capital budgets. Operating is what is really facing that strain. We're talking public safety, education, some of these areas that the mayor has said may need to face cuts. Capital is investments in infrastructure, which is where the money for this project would come from. And Wisdom, Mayor Bowser continues to emphasize how important this would be in her goal of making DC, a sports and entertainment hub. She's talking about pivoting the economy.
Right.
Now, if she can get the whole council on board, then Congress has to approve it, of course. And right now, they're still, in this limbo with the 2025 budget.
Right.
So there's a lot of steps that need
goodness.
to happen before this becomes reality.
Yes, there's a lot to discuss, lots of numbers to throw around here, and make sure that this gets approved on so many different levels before we even get to the point where we can really say, hooray, they're coming back to Washington, D.C.
100%.
All right, so in addition to what you just talked about, D.C. council members aren't the only ones who are split on this. A group called Homes Not Stadiums is pushing for a public referendum on this particular issue. They said they'd rather see affordable housing here in the RFK area, and they want the future of the stadium to be put to a vote.
To ask the taxpayers, especially in a time like this, where everyone is struggling, to make us pay for a $1 billion stadium for some billionaire who's worth more than that and can easily pay for that themselves, I just think is such a slap in the face for voters, citizens.
Homes Not Stadiums have already filed a ballot initiative, and tonight they're holding a public meeting to share their concerns about that. It starts at 6 at the Hill Center in Navy Yard. You can also join virtually on Facebook. Now, we want to know how you feel about this entire deal, this entire conversation about bringing the Washington Commanders back to Washington, D.C. You can text us your thoughts at the number that you see on your screen. That number, 202-895-5599. Annie, Allison, back to you.